Is Julia Ostrov with us?
Harold, you're a secret
Yes,
lesbian.
I am.
Okay, great. Tell us. So, Rabbi, so may I introduce our special guest
Yes,
today? Rabbi,
Harold.
would you like to do it?
Harold, the TA, is going to introduce our special guest who's now going to be a regular. This is
Okay. Julia is now taking over the role of singing us in and singing us out. Julia, wave. Julia is a long-term member of the synagogue. She is a beautiful singer and lay leader. Julia, tell us a little about where you've been singing lately. You've done a lot of synagogue work other than CBST and around, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done some assistant chazan work at East Midwood Jewish Center in Brooklyn as well.
And Julia and I both went to the Davening Leadership Training Institute, which is a lay leader. So it is about 10 o'clock. Would you like to sing us in, Julia?
Sure.
All right, let me pull up our text for today. We're going to start with Miriam Hanivia, correct? Whoops.
Yeah, and if I can, I'd just like to say that I chose both the opening and closing songs for today to be about Miriam, the prophetess, for whom we can place a cup at our Seder table alongside Elijah's cup. And I'm thinking about her because she teaches us the value of saving one human life when she rescues her baby brother from the Nile, and she's also the keeper of the waters. There is a well that follows the Israelites around in her merit, and it's said to be healing and sustaining, and I'm thinking about the healing waters that we're all using to wash our hands with every day. So keeping Miriam in mind, I invite you to please join along.
And everybody, please mute your microphones except for Julia.
Except for Julia, and we will sing along with you. We will do this has become the Zoom singing meme. Okay, so we'll sing along with you. Take it away, Julia.
Great. Yes. Miriam Hanivia, Uz v'zimra b'yada, Miriam tirkod itanu, lehagdil zimrat olam, Miriam tirkod itanu, letaken et ha'olam. Bimera v'yaminu, tibienu, el meha Yeshua, el meha Yeshua, Miriam Hanivia, Uz v'zimra b'yada, Miriam tirkod itanu, lehagdil zimrat olam, Miriam tirkod itanu, letaken et ha'olam.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Julia, so much.
I will put up song two.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I wanted to let everyone know that Julia, along, I think, with Cantor Jacob Nimi, they're going to form, I hope, like a little musical support team for the class. And they will, among themselves, decide who will be leading and going out. And thank you both. Judy Ribnick is stepping back from this role for a very good reason. And notice we'll go out to the synagogue in a couple of weeks. But we've been able to use some funds from the city to hire Judy to do work. Can we get rid of this screen now so I can see everybody? How do I do that? Do I have to do, there we are. So Judy is going to start now working for CBST as a consultant, as a social worker, somebody who for 35 years has run the social work department at Dorot. She's now going to be working full-time at CBST, at least for the next 3 months, helping to organize our aging initiative and working with the work, helping us do better the work we're doing in supporting folks at CBST going through this period of time. So we're really excited. That's going to become officially known after Pesach. Right now we're just so you're all on the inside now hearing so she's now just starting. And so she needs to focus her time and energy on working with those resources. So we're thrilled. You'll get the formal announcement right after Pesach. So she's not available to anybody individually now, and it's not going to, you'll get more information about that afterwards. But I don't want to take more time from our study, except Harold had a fantastic idea this morning that tomorrow morning we spend a little time talking about Psalms during Pesach, especially during the Seder. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about Psalms of Hallel, which are done during the Haggadah, and I'll teach about Hallel in general, and we'll focus on Psalm 114, because it's the shortest of the Hallel Psalms. So it actually means we'll study it. So we're going to study Psalm 114 tomorrow if you want to prepare. And I'm going to teach about Psalms of Hallel as a group. You don't need to know more about that now, but you will tomorrow. So what it means that Thursday and Friday, we have no class because of Pesach. Monday, we will continue. And on Monday, what I'd like to do is to share personal Psalms that anybody's written of Psalm 1 and 2 that we haven't yet shared. I think we've done 3 personal Psalms of 1. And I know a couple of people have done also another Psalm 1. So we'll share, and I'll ask you to read your own Psalm if you've written something, or if over these few days of Pesach, you'd like to take a hand at writing your own Psalm based on 1 or 2. You can do it 2 ways, I suggest. And if you've never written something before, just go line by line and literally write out what do those words mean to you? You don't have to go fancier than that. How do you make meaning for yourself from the lines of the Psalms that we've been studying? Take either Psalm 1 or Psalm 2 or both of them, and that's enough to share. Some of you are very sophisticated writers, and you might want to take that as a springboard and not stop with that. Whatever you want to do. I personally like writing out the Psalm. I'm not a sophisticated writer. What I like to do is when I study a Psalm or work with a Psalm, I try and write it in my own words. And that would be wonderful for anybody who would like to share on Monday. Harold, should they send them to you in advance, or so that we could, what do you suggest?
Yes, send them to me if you'd like me to share them on the screen. You're also invited to post them on our Facebook group.
That's right.
Psalms class. And nobody has done this yet, but anybody who feels very ambitious could make a recording of herself reading her Psalm and posting it on our Facebook group too. And I will be distributing our study text of Psalm 114 right after the class. I have it all done up.
Oh, thank you so much, Harold. So I know there have been a couple of things posted on Facebook of interpretations people have written. So that'll be a chance for us to share them as a group. And then the idea is that I think we'll end Psalm 2 on Monday that way. We'll see, So today I want to look at Psalm 2. I'm not going to read it through in Hebrew, so we have time to do these 2 interpretations, Alters and Fisher. Do we have a copy of that? Harold, do you?
Well, we certainly have Alter. Give me a minute.
Let's start with Alter. I want to start with Alter.
Okay, hold on.
We can? Sorry, thank you.
I think we can.
I gotta tell Harold in advance, but I haven't gotten that good yet. This is why the interns learn to live with me.
I know, to work on our feet.
Yes, I come up with things as I.
Yeah, I had sent it out to everybody in a PDF, the entire, let's see, we have Alter here. Hold on a second.
And just to remind you, when we say Alter, this is Robert Alter. And what makes his translations, interpretations significant, and I'll say this over and over again, is that his goal is to get to create in English what he imagines, not just the meaning of the biblical Hebrew, but the structure. He tries to understand the structure of the sentences, the structure of biblical poetry, and he tries to find a way to get to the structure so that an English reader will feel some of the rhythm, some of the structure, some of the poetic techniques, whether it's alliteration or repetition or how the actual sentences look. So the reason it's good to look at Alter is that he tries with the English to actually imitate in the English remember I've talked about the different two phrases that most biblical sentences, and again, there are many exceptions, and if we have any of the experts on, they will want to point to the exceptions. Today, we're not going to talk about exceptions. Most biblical poems are known for this feature that each sentence has two phrases or two clauses, and relating those two clauses one to the other is very important for understanding the meaning or the emphasis or contrast. And we think that they were sung antiphonally, meaning there would be singers, maybe different voices, maybe the same voice singing back and forth. So really emphasizing this dual parallelism, it's called. In biblical poetry, and Alter loves this word, it's called parallelism, when there are two lines that there's something parallel. Sometimes the parallel is a contrast, sometimes the parallel is an emphasis, sometimes the parallel is a escalation.
Here we are.
All right, that's the end of one, so we need to go to the next page.
So we should see why are the nations aroused? Is that not what you see there?
No, we see he shall be planted like a tree by the waters.
Hold on. I'm looking at why are the nations, that's so strange.
That is very strange. We don't see that.
Why are the nations aroused? Hold on.
I can see it over on the side, but it's not quite.
Hold on. Okay, yes, hold on a second. Let's see this.
Full screen, we'll see it. There we go. Yes, thank you.
Great.
All right, so I'm going to hold open the Hebrew also, and I'll be pointing back and forth. But so first of all, notice, can everybody see the screen? Is that good? Everybody can see it? So you'll notice again that he's trying to imitate the biblical structure of the poetry. So the first verse has two phrases, two clauses. I want to make sure everybody understands this, and this is a great psalm to illustrate it. It's actually more clear in some ways than even Psalm 1 was. So what's the first verse? With his translation, why are the nations aroused and the peoples murmur vain things? So that's one sentence, but the way he has separated it makes clear with where the semicolon, or in this case, he's using a comma, separates the two. So this is, if anybody doesn't understand this or see it clearly, if you could let Harold know in the chat, because this is very important. So in these first two sentences, it's really clear. Why are the nations aroused and the people murmur vain things? Now you'll remember the Christians and Jewish traditions read these very differently. For the Jewish traditions, it's why do people who aren't following or understanding Yud Hey Vav Hey? And for Christians, it's for everybody who does not follow Jesus. So, and that's why this, again, this psalm gets used a lot. And in the King James Version, why do the heathens rage? Kings of the earth. Now it's very interesting. Malchei Eretz, kings of the earth take their stand, and princes conspire against the Lord and against his anointed. So what one of the things Alter's pointing out here is that he's even saying the why is referring to verses 1 and 2. So that why do the kings of the earth take their stand and princes conspire against the Lord and against his anointed? Now you'll notice Alter changes the structure that in verse 2 in the Hebrew, yitatzvu, the verb comes first, but Alter doesn't have the verb. And so in other words, if you were to do a literal translation, a word for word translation of verse 2 using Alter's English, and you were to do it in the same order that the Hebrew appears, it would be, take their stand, kings of the earth. That would be a literal translation of that verse. Take their stand, kings of the earth. Everybody see that? But, oh, sorry.
We did, it's okay, I did send out a PDF of that literal interlinear translation where the English is under the Hebrew word from right to left. So that, not for right now, but if people want to refer to that, it'll be made clear what the rabbi's saying. Go ahead.
Right. So Alter, though, doesn't write the English this way, even though, as I keep saying, he's the one who wants to adhere closely to the biblical Hebrew, because he also wants to make it poetry for an English reader. And in English, when we reverse the order, as in when any language, I think, or certainly I know for Hebrew and English, when you reverse a normal order of a poem, of a verse, you're making an emphasis. So if we were to say, take their stand, kings of the earth, it would sound like we're trying to emphasize take their stand and not kings of the earth. But the biblical Hebrew is not doing that because it's normal in biblical Hebrew for the verb to come first. So the biblical Hebrew normal way of putting it is for the verb to come first. So Alter keeps that by making it a normal English sentence. This is a little convoluted. If you're not following, don't worry, we'll keep going. So really it's why are the nations aroused and the people murmur vain things? Why do the kings of the earth take their stance and princes conspire together? In this case, this is a 3-phrase verse. And the way Alter has it written is to show you that there are 3 phrases that create this kind of tripartite parallelism, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. But there are 3 phrases. So kings of the earth is a parallel to princes, and the 2 of them are parallels against the Lord and his anointed. Again, I'm not dealing with the gender issue. And once again, we see the word Lord printed with the small all caps font. And once again, that to remind you, that means it's referring to the Yud He Vav He verb, Yud He Vav He word for God. And his is capitalized because it's referring to God. So we're not confused about, oh yeah, I've got a fly in here. We're not confused about who the his is referring to. And a simple translation of anointed. And again, over and over again, you'll feel the difference if you're a Christian reading this text. And even Jews in a contemporary Christian society, we read it, it sounds Christian to us. Once again, in the context in which it was written, anointed was simply whoever was becoming king. Okay, so again, we see let us tear off their fetters and fling away their bonds. Who is speaking here? The kings and their princes who are conspiring. Whose fetters and whose bonds? Yud He Vav He. In other words, those who are, and again, as I used very strong language yesterday, and I can't wait to see how AP handles that. They're going to say, oi, oi, oi. But that if you really want to get to it, imagine this is the Stalins of the world. This is the Trumps of the world. They are saying, let us not be limited by those who care about justice or peace. We experience those limitations as fetters. We don't want to have to care about feeding the poor. We want to make as much money as we want to make. We don't want to have the bonds of limitation. We want to be able to do whatever we want. He who dwells in the heavens will laugh. And again, this Yoshev Bashamayim, he who dwells in the heavens will last. Again, making the contrast between heavens and earth. Adonai Yil'ag Lamo, and the master derides him. Is it possible, Harold, to look at no, let's keep going through. Let's just stick to the altar. Then he will speak to them. And again, notice where the capital H's are for he. Those are obviously trying to clarify, because in the Hebrew, that it's referring to Yud He Vav He. Can we go to the next page?
Whoops. Yes, sorry, it's a little small.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm good. And you'll see in Alter's commentary that why are nations aroused? This is clearly originally meant to be, Alter says, composed in response to a specific historical situation, but there's we can't identify which they were. What one can make out is an alliance of nations intending to attack Judea, or perhaps merely to rebel against the condition. Okay, let's go on to verse 6.
Do you not see it? I see it on my screen.
No, I don't see it. It's interesting. It's not appearing on the screen.
Huh.
Not on mine.
Hold on a second. Let me see what's wrong here.
When you're sharing something, you have to unshare what you shared and then reshare when you change what you're sharing.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
While Harold's doing that, should we pause for any questions, or is that too complicated, Harold?
I think I have it up. Let me make sure. Let's see if we got this.
Okay, I see Megan Cossey asked about line or clause. No, that's a very good question. By line, I mean verse, which means the whole verse, or pasuk in Hebrew, and that includes all the clauses. If I get sloppy when I use the English, I should be more careful. So by line, I mean verse, which means pasuk, and phrase or clause is the sub phrase of the line.
Do you
Okay?
see it? Do you see
Now
the
I
right?
see it.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
now I got it. Now I got it. All right, so this is verse 6. Oh, now it's tiny. I'm gonna look in in my text itself. Okay, verse 6. And I. Now again, I'm looking close. Why does it have and I dash I? Do you see that? What Alter, again, whenever Alter does anything with punctuation, with phrasing, you have to ask the question, what is it in the biblical Hebrew that Alter wants to make sure an English reader can experience? Because in the Hebrew it says, va'ani. It could have just said ani, meaning I. Va'ani. Remember that vav in the beginning of a sentence, which just means A-N-D, and in modern Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, it has some kind of emphatic role to play. So for instance, my translation says, but it is I. So again, kind of an emphasis. There's a contrast between who is the contrast between now the one who is speaking is Yud He Vav He, Hashem, the source of holiness in the world, is responding to the evil leaders who are the source of oppression. Okay, you all might think that you're in power, and I have appointed my king, capital M, but note the small k in king. And remember, in biblical Hebrew, there's no capitals, there's no punctuation. So he's trying to bring into the English, so the capital M means the Alter saying the speaker is Yud He Vav He, but the king in this case is the human king that's representing or doing political work on Zion, my holy mountain. Again, M is for God. Holy mountain means it's a regular mountain that's holy because of what happens there. Oh, Harold, thank you for the size of the letters. That's great. Let me tell as is due of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. I myself did beget you. Ask of me, and I shall give you nations as your estates, and your holdings the end of the earth. You will smash them with a rod of iron. Like a potter's jar, you will dash them. And now, O you kings, pay mind. Be chastened, you rulers of earth. Let's go to the end, and then we're going to go to...
Hold on just 1 second. Let me get this up for you. Let me make this
Harold.
big. Hold on. Okay, share screen. How's that?
Okay, so this is very common that now the psalm will end with, so worship the Lord. This is kind of what is the lesson of the psalm, so to speak. What's the nimshal? What are we learning? Okay, so be careful about who you're following, the one you should follow. And again, Lord is a hard word for us. So let's try and keep remembering Yud He Vav He is the power in the universe for holiness. And the word for fear that's used here is, I want to get that, is ir'ah, which is the same word as yamim noraim, days of awe. Yes, it means fear, but again, that's a harsh word for us. But it's the same word for awe, or when you're just full of inspiring, and trembling, the same kind of thing that happens in the result of being in the presence of something so grand, so big. With purity, which is contrasting with the princes and kings of the earth. Be armed. In other words, the way you'll be protected is against the kings and the princes, is with purity, is by seeking holiness, lest he rage and you be lost on the way, for his, capital H, wrath in a moment flares up. And then the kind of coda, but all who shelter in him will be happy, going back to the Ashrei Ha'ish from the beginning of Psalm 1. So a couple of things here, and then we're going to quickly go to the Norman Fisher. So again, you see his rhythm. Alter is showing you all the parallelisms. So the parallelism, for instance, in this, with purity be armed, do it this way, And then the second phrase, lest he rage and you be lost on your way. That's the parallelism, is what will happen if you don't. So there's this, each phrase is somehow a commentary on phrase number 1. All right, let's pause quickly for questions, and then we're going to go to Norman Fisher.
Rabbi, I don't have the Fisher text. Can you take a picture of it and text it to me, and I'll put it up?
Yes.
All right, and then Benjamin Shafran has a question. Benjamin, if you would unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Okay, and I'm going to take a picture, so I'm looking over here, but I'm listening.
Benjamin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm having trouble with the issue of who is the speaker in the later part of the psalm.
Oops.
I don't have the text in front of me, the altar text, so it's a little bit hard. But
Well, the altar text we had on the screen, were you able to see that?
I did, but it's no longer on the screen.
Correct, that's true. Okay, hold on, I'm taking this picture.
Okay. What was your question then, Benjamin?
The question is about the speaker and who speaks in, 1 second.
All right, Harold, I'm sending this to you. Let's see if this will work, okay?
Okay, let's see if this works. Did you text it or email it?
I texted it. Is that okay,
Right.
or should I email
No,
it?
it's fine. It just hasn't come through yet.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, let me pay attention.
With,
Sorry, but I'm focusing on the technology here.
okay,
Yes.
let me know.
All right, I'm ready. I'm here.
Okay, I'm
Who's
having
the speaker? Yep,
in Pasuk 6.
yep. So according to Alter, and now we're going to look at Norman Fisher, because Norman Fisher has a different idea. But according to Alter, it is Yud He Vav He speaking.
But then how does it comport with the following Pasuk 7 and 8? That it can't be Yud He Vav He speaking about himself. It doesn't, somehow it doesn't comport properly.
Only because he's referring to himself, and I'm using he only to stay within this. Believe me, I'm comfortable with all genders for God. But what Alter's understanding is, let me tell it as is due of the Lord, is also Yud He Vav He speaking. He said to me, you are my son. No, then it is no, you're right. Alter is saying for the verse 7, it is the king speaking. The king, the anointed
So this is
one.
switch between 6 and 7. That
Correct, according to Alter, yes.
okay.
Alter sees 7 as being the anointed one speaking, and number 6 is Yud He Vav He.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at Norman Fisher. I want to make sure, yeah, good, we have good time. And Norman Fisher, as we talked about yesterday, is a Zen Buddhist, born Jewish, of course. So many of those who are responsible for Zen Buddhism in the United States were born Jewish. Think about all those who are responsible for really bringing mindfulness and insight meditation. Were 3 Jews who brought it from India. So there's quite a deep connection between Buddhism and Jews in the United States. And Norman Fisher is one of them. I don't even know if how he identifies himself now, if he even says he was certainly born Jewish. I don't know how he identifies. So, and Ben, this goes to Ben's question about who's speaking. Norman Fisher totally throws out that very literal, what Alter is trying to get to. And part of it is that it's not really clear. So why not? He's doing a very different thing. So I read this to you yesterday, and today we're going to look at it a little bit more. And here you have it written down. And what I couldn't show you so well yesterday by reading it, but you can see here, is that Fisher makes a distinction by fonts about who's speaking. Because as Ben pointed out, it's not so clear. It's very confusing who the speaker is. And different translators and adapters have responded to that differently. So we have Alter's response and now Fisher's response. But again, you'll notice several things about Fisher. He throws out gender entirely. He throws out about talking about God in the third person entirely. He really wants to get to a very Zen, Buddhist, deep understanding of what is the meaning underneath everything of the psalm. What can we learn from this psalm, from his perspective. So even the first question I find fascinating as a translation or as a interpretation. So we have Lama Ragshu Goyim, which I told you is such a famous, famous phrase. It's quoted everywhere in rabbinic and Jewish texts as a, just in Yiddish literature, it's quoted. It's kind of like why it's used in Yiddish, like, and it will be quoted in the Hebrew. You know, why are the nations so crazy, right? So we have why do the heathens rage? And how does Fisher, what makes nations erupt and people's mind go wild? So adding this, what makes nations erupt, as opposed to why do they, he's trying to get to that underneath, like what makes people make bad choices, so to speak? How do we understand the impulses that takes people away from the right path? What makes this happen? And people's minds go wild. And that's as what we've read before, and the people who think of worthless or empty plans. And in their senselessness, think to flee from you, and from the authority only you confer, saying, let us break apart the ties and throw away the cords. So let's look at this for a second. So what's Fisher doing here? So again, he's talking about, he first of all doesn't capitalize why for you, for God, right? Because Buddhism isn't going to see God as a separate universal or transcendent force. But so what's the you here? That's a big question to ask of Norman Fisher. In their senselessness, they think to flee from you and from the authority only you confer. So who is the you? Saying, and who's speaking? Now he's referring back to the heedless, right? The heedless are saying, let us break apart the ties and throw away the cords. So what are the heedless saying? That's our question. You laugh at them. You hold them up in derision. You speak your anger for them, terrifying them in your confoundedness. Again, who's the you here? And now we have this section that's entirely in italics, and we have to ask our questions. What's Fisher trying to say about the italics? I have ordained what is as it utterly is. On Zion, this mountain where you stand, announcing the order of things in clear words, that you are my children, repeatedly created as I am now, and that what you with rounded words pronounce, I will grant. The nations are for you only, your immediate birthright you possess and are possessed by all and everywhere. And so you break oppression like a rod of iron is broken. You crush heedlessness as a potter's vessel is crushed underfoot. And you who think that flight from me is possible, that it is protection, advancement, and power, take warning in these words, : recognize the sovereignty of what is. Recognize it is with awesome respect. Rejoice in it, but with care. Pay homage to it, but without greed, lest the unnameable consume you in the leaping flames of loneliness, dispossession, and hatred. Back to change of font to non-italicized. Happy are they who find their home in the kingdom of what is. So now I'm gonna stop speaking. We have 13 minutes or so. And I'd love to, what do people think? What's your reaction? Let's see if we can handle some, let's see if we could actually get some reaction without.
I see Shep's hand. Shep, would you like to speak? Unmute yourself and
And
speak.
if people could speak briefly,
No, it's okay. I'll
get
pass.
as many people to speak as possible.
And Jeremy, you had something to say. Jeremy Lawrence, unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
So I think that pasuk or verse 6 is the psalmist. When pasuk 7, Adonai said to me, "You are my son," and this seems to be reflected in this translation. I'm sorry, I forget the Zen.
Fisher, Norm Fisher.
Norman Fisher. That Norm Fisher also brings the psalm back to himself.
So you're saying it's the voice of the psalmist, the voice of the writer.
Yes.
Interesting. Very interesting. Good.
And Nina Lubin adds in here, there's no anointed one in this translation. It's
Interesting.
about us. It's about
It's
us.
about us.
Thank you,
It's
Nina.
about us. Wow,
All right.
that's very interesting. Good point.
If any, just raise your hand. You go to manage participants on the bottom, to participants on the bottom, and it says raise hand. And
This is
you
a
can
good
raise your hand.
skill. This is a good Zoom skill for everybody to learn. When we
Right.
say raise hand, if everybody takes your cursor or mouse to the participants in the bottom, click on that, you'll see there's a icon that says raise hand.
Okay.
Does everybody
Adrian
see that?
Benjamin, unmute yourself.
Mute myself. Hi. The Fisher seems to have a slightly more compassionate tone for mankind, humankind,
Yes.
which you feel like you're a little bit more embraced as you're reading it.
Absolutely.
All right.
And the question, of course, which we can never totally answer, is what I think what Fisher is doing is using I mean, obviously Buddhism isn't contemporary, but using his lens to find meaning in it. And that's the challenge. So when you read words that are difficult in a psalm, to find, well, in what ways can that be meaningful? Somebody wrote the other day, which I thought was very powerful, that, well, talking about angry God might be uncomfortable. Anger is a real human emotion also. And what can we learn about anger that we see in the world? It would be, if we're all created in God's image, well, maybe there's anger there too. And how do we deal with it? So interesting. But I agree with you, Adrian. It's much more compassionate and it helps us understand a different way of reading the psalm. So when I read the psalm in Hebrew, I personally feel this energy in it. But that's only after years and years of having a relationship to it.
Michael Goldstein has his hand up. Michael, if you would mute yourself and speak. Michael Goldstone, are you there?
He's there.
Goldstein.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can
Yeah.
hear you, Michael. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I have a question that goes back to the first word of Psalm 1. The first word of Psalm 1 is happy. Happy the man who has not walked. And then at the end of Psalm 1, at the beginning of Psalm 2, I'm a little confused now. Oh yes, at the
Same
end
word
of
is at the end of Psalm 2, correct?
Psalm 2, the word happy appears again.
Yes.
The question is a synonym for happy fulfillment?
It's an absolutely correct adaptation. We don't, as I have, I'll say this a million times as we're doing this study, nobody knows what the word ashrei means or meant to the biblical writer 2,500 years ago. We can't possibly know without having people alive to tell us. We can only guess from context. And therefore we can have a range of what the word, I would totally go with you, Michael. Happy to an American ear, I think sounds too superficial for what the psalmist means. I think maybe in medieval English, happy was but for us and Americans, happy is a very superficial word, like the word nice kind of, So I agree with you. I would look for a word that's deeper than happy. Fulfilled, I think, is a good one. Content. So I agree with you. And as I said, the Talmud itself actually argues that this might be one psalm. As I said, because Ashrei, that word is found in the beginning of Psalm 1, and Ashrei is found at the end of Psalm 2. It's a very ancient Jewish belief that maybe these psalms are meant to be read together because of the connection between what makes for, and again, the word happy, like the word God, I think throws us off. We think we know what happy means, and I think it's deeper. So Michael, I'm with you on that one.
Thank you.
Ginny Hennenberg, you are unmuted. You have your hand up.
Thank you. Rabbi, nothing I've heard.
So I can see you. Hold on a second. I need to find what squares Ginny.
She's on the phone. She's not on.
Okay, that's why I can't see her. Okay, great.
Okay, nothing here that I've read answers the question, though, of why the nations are in an uproar. The psalm talks about consequences and alternatives, but it doesn't seem to me to really answer the question, what is the uproar about? Why is that
point.
Am I missing something here?
Not at all. That's why because there's an absence of context, so to speak, that's why there's an opening to vast range of interpretation. For some scholars, they believe there must have been a historical moment. Maybe this was actually referring to a particular historical moment, although there's no indicator in the rest of the psalm of what it is. But that's why for Christians, the why do the heathens rage absolutely brings a Christian interpretation, because they don't accept Jesus. And as I think Simon pointed out, the way that this psalm is used and handles Messiah is to emphasize the pagan and Jewish rejection of Jesus. So for Christians, it's totally clear. For Jews, it's been kind of widely translated, I would say, as meaning, why is there a lack of the opposite, or the ragshu for Jews have traditionally meant the opposite of ashrei, kind of what the contentment or sense of fulfillment or sense of centeredness is the opposite of ragshu. That's why the verb that starts this psalm, ragshu, even in modern Hebrew, has a real the excitement word to it, energy, and it's a contrasting word to those who have found a sense of being centered. Even Fisher goes to that direction. There's a contrast. Who's ragshu, who's all in tumult, versus who is full of ashrei. And I'm using the exact form, the grammar is incorrect, but who's full of osher, who's full of whatever that word means, is in contrast to who's up and unsatisfied. And I think Fisher is saying the contrast is the heedless, who are in contrast with those who find their home. So you can see, even if you look at the beginning and end of Fisher, there's a contrast between who has found their home and who is heedless and whose minds are going wild. For Fisher, the answer is we need to find our home, our internal home, our sense of being centered. And it has nothing, so everybody's going to answer that question a little differently based on the frame they're looking at this psalm in. But Ginny, it's an excellent question.
Hillary Nudell, you are unmuted if you still want to ask a question. I see your hand.
Yeah, I just have to say I'm pretty blown away by Norman Fisher's version, having studied Buddhism, but not having studied the Psalms. And sort of one of the things that Buddhism says, it doesn't say that there's no self or no God. It just says that talking about it doesn't remove suffering. It's focusing on it because you're making it into something concrete. You're trying to make it into something concrete when you say it. I believe the early images of the Buddha in Buddhism was just a cloth, was just a shawl without a figure, pre-Greek.
Interesting.
And so when Norman Fisher is trying to, when he is addressing the ineffable aspect of God, it really helps you understand the God in this way, in this Jewish context.
I agree.
You know, finally, without trying to make it into something concrete and physical, it really brings it back to the spiritual aspect, which is amazing.
Which I think is deeply, deeply, deeply Jewish, and we've lost it. So that's what I really, So my one regret about Fisher is that he doesn't do every psalm. So he kind of picks and chooses the psalms, and as a result, we'll only be able to look at his versions of the psalms, obviously, that he's chosen. But I think it's fantastic.
Rabbi, I think one last question. Noreen, do you still have a question? I unmuted you.
Yeah, I was just curious about, I am comfortable with the religious language because I think religious language sometimes bridges beyond the individual to that idea of collective.
I agree with you, Dean. I totally agree with you, but not for everybody.
Yeah, but I'm just saying for me, it's about addressing that collective, that I might feel bad about something I've done, but when it's Hitler or Mussolini or these what's happened in Miramar, which is vast numbers of people are harmed. And I find, what I wanted to ask you was the balance, and what I find fascinating in the Psalms is this balancing between the individual because I think
Yes.
in the West, we have a very, especially based on the English law and so on, a very
This is a
individual
super important point.
versus the collective. And I find that when he says kings or whatever, there's a sense of comfort in that the largest dominion of the cosmos will hold us in our human behavior accountable.
Yep. So Dean, I think you and I share this, and I think it's an important point. The other lens, if psychology is one of the important lenses that's so in our air, we don't even notice that it is a particular lens. We just assume everybody knows about psychological understandings, and it is an important truth to understand human behavior and but it is one important truth. The other one is individualism. And Americans are particularly diseased with this lens that everything is seen through individual power, individual action, individual control, and the idea of the relationship to the collective, though maybe this whole experience is going to have an impact on us, the relationship to the collective is not something we automatically experience. If you talk to people in other cultures, you know, like Asian, like what we're seeing, you know, in Japan or China or ancient Jewish Israelite cultures, the group experience is the lens through which they see everything, not just the individual. And that's a big difference. And yes, I think that religious language is very much interested in both of those. How are we part of? What's the impact of being part of? How are we strengthened? How are we obligated? What's our responsibility to a collective? And experience the transcendent or God happens not just through an individual experience. So that's a very interesting point, and we'll see it again and again. So thank you for that. Wow, great comments, everybody.
We are at time, so we're going to go back to Julia Ostrov, who will sing us out with Miriam's song.
And that's a great segue in terms of the transcendence of a collective experience, because we think about Miriam not only as the watcher over of her baby brother in the Nile and of the keeper of the waters, but also the one who leads the people in jubilant celebration upon their crossing into freedom. So yeah, please sing along with me. Muted, but sing, please. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. As Miriam stood upon the shores and gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she soon came to believe. Whoever thought the sea would part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass to freedom and march to the promised land. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. The room will stay open for a few minutes, 5-10 minutes or so, and so much fun to study with all of you. Blessings to everybody. And remember, tomorrow morning, Psalm 114 and Hallel as a preparation for the Seder.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Check your email.